Friends, after going through the two topics of international taxation, one the AAR, the Authority of Advanced Ruling, and the other DTAA, that is Double Tax Avoidance Agreement. We are now going to take up a topic which has created many litigations in India. And that's nothing but the transfer pricing. What has happened over the years that the multinational groups with its sister concerns across different countries have substantially grown their business. In the process, what has happened is, and it is common all over the world, that there is a constant practice going on of over-invoicing and under-invoicing, whereby the objective is to avoid or to evade the tax. Over years, the government has observed this practice, and as a result, we therefore introduced the Section 9292 with its various extensions in order to mitigate this practice as far as possible. It's a huge topic. Requires a lot of concentration and requires an in-depth practical know-how of transfer pricing during your articleship. If you have been exposed to this sort of work called transfer pricing during your articles, probably you know a little more in detail. And many of my friends who have not this opportunity of exposing their articleship period to the transfer pricing will find it slightly difficult. But our job is that every difficult topic, let's make it easy. And that's for which we are today meeting here to discuss. This is our journey. And therefore I would say, I am just walking on the road. How can I call it as my goal? I'm walking on the road. How can I call it as my goal? Hey God, how can I call it also my stubbornness? Hey God, how can I call it my stubbornness? Are we have to touch those heights which are the aspirations of my heart? Are yet to touch those heights which are the aspirations of my heart? And till I touch those heights, how can I proclaim that I am the Almighty? How can I proclaim that I am the Almighty? These words can be very well said also in the introduction of this topic, that is a long journey and I've yet to achieve a lot. Transfer pricing topic is not the end of my journey. अभी तो चलना है, अभी तो चलना है, रास्ते को मंजिल कैसे मान लूं? अभी तो चलना है, रास्ते को मंजिल कैसे मान लूं? मसीहा इस दिल को अपने जिद का कातिल कैसे मान लूं? मसीहा दिल को अपने जिद का कातिल कैसे मान लूं? जिन ऊंचाइयों को छूने की हसरतें हैं इस दिल में, उन्हें चुमे बिना मैं खुद को खुदा कैसे मानूं? उन्हें चुमे बिना मैं खुद को खुदा कैसे मानूं? This is exactly what I say. I have yet to touch those heights of the aspirations that I have, and unless I touch those heights, I cannot proclaim to be the Almighty. Let us therefore begin our journey and continue our journey with this topic of transfer pricing. To understand this transfer pricing, my dear friends, let's have a look to this chart. Let's have a look to this chart, and you can see right in the center the word transfer pricing. This transfer pricing originally was limited and restricted to the international transactions. To what type of transactions? To the international transactions. And what are those international transactions? There it is mentioned that international transactions have been covered and specified under section 92B, the alphabet B, 92B. Of late, the government then decided to make legislations, amended the IT Act, amended the section 92, and now the transfer pricing is also applicable to the specified domestic transactions. Apart from international transactions, now it is also applicable to the specified domestic transactions. And for that, there is a section 92BA. The 92BA. So section 92BA covers the specified domestic transactions. Repeat. Section 92BA covers the specified domestic transactions. कहने का मतलब यह है कि जब लोगों ने कर चोरी करनी शुरुआत कर ली, किसकी चोरी? कर चोरी, आयकर की चोरी करनी शुरू कर दी, तब जाकर ये सरकार ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग का कंसेप्ट लेकर आई और शुरुआत में उन्होंने सिर्फ इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शंस पे अप्लाई किया था। उसके बाद कुछ सालों के बाद सरकार ने इसे स्पेसिफाइड डोमेस्टिक ट्रांजैक्शंस पे भी अप्लाई किया। लेकिन the most important part is whether it is an international transaction or whether it is a specified domestic transaction, the transaction should have occurred between two or more than two parties. Between two or more than two parties who shall be called by the word as associated persons. Who shall be called by the word as associated persons. So you ask me, sir, who are these associated persons? आप पूछेंगे ये associated person कौन होते हैं और उनकी परिभाषा क्या है? Section 92A gives a definition of who are to be classified as associated persons. So it can be an international transaction between the associated persons, then transfer pricing is applicable. Or it can be specified domestic transactions between the associated persons, then again the transfer pricing can be applicable. Okay? So 3 points to trigger the provisions of transfer pricing. ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग प्रोविजंस की शुरुआत के लिए ये तीन जो हमने पॉइंट्स रखे हैं आपके सामने, वहीं से ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग प्रोविजंस की शुरुआत होती है। या तो वो इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शन होगा एसोसिएटेड पर्संस के बीच में, या तो फिर वो स्पेसिफाइड डोमेस्टिक ट्रांजैक्शन होगा बेसिस एसोसिएटेड पर्संस के बीच में। और जैसा ही ये हुआ ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग प्रोविजंस की हम शुरुआत में सबसे पहले द वेरी फर्स्ट थिंग दैट वी डू द मोमेंट ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग प्रोविजंस आर टू बी अप्लाइड, we calculate what? A arm length price. What I say? We calculate a arm length price, meaning the ALP. What do we calculate? The ALP. Now this ALP, in short, what I call it as arm length price. What do you mean by this word arm length price? I may have a price different for my nearer and dearer people. Tomorrow morning, the brother of my wife comes and purchases the goods from me. He is a nearer, dearer one. I may charge him little less. But tomorrow morning, a very unknown stranger walks in. He is not so near. He is not so dear. He is at what length? Arm's length. A little bit away. For him, what I would be charging is a normal, reasonable market price. So that's why that ALP has been called by the word as arm length price, which is charged to any independent, neutral parties in the market. This is covered, the ALP is covered, its provisions are covered by section 92C. By 92C it is covered and supported by the Rule 10, the Rule 10B of the Income Tax Act Rules 1962. Both together gives us a solution and a complete idea as to how the ALP shall be calculated and how the ALP shall be applicable. This is what, in a nutshell, your first chart on the transfer pricing talks about to you. Is this clear to you, my dear friends? Okay. In the case of international transactions, which I was referring earlier to the section 92B, the 92B says that the transaction can be between a non-resident and a resident of this country. Both the parties, of that the one is resident, the other is non-resident, then definitely this transaction will be called by the word as international transactions. Or it can be other way, that both the parties are non-resident, but out of one of that non-resident, the other has an effect of taxation here in India. And therefore, it will attract the provisions of transfer pricing. These international transactions can be number one, of any transfer, of any exchange, or a sale of tangible assets. Now, these tangible assets, or their use, or their lease, or their rights, can be the subject matter. Or there can also be a possibility of transfers or a sale of intangible assets like franchising, like goodwill, like patents, like trademarks, like license fees. And this can be the second transaction between a non-resident and a resident, or between the two non-resident. And the third are the financial transactions which involves the capital borrowings or lending of money, and also might involve the transfers of trading securities. And this can be the third aspect of the international transactions. The Finance Act 2014 has then added one more transaction in 92B, wherein I want to explain it by way of this particular diagram, where X is the first enterprise and Y is the second enterprise, and X and Y are associated persons according to 92A. But now, the Y and a Z are associated persons, but X and Z are not associated. Now a transaction happens between an X and a Z. Now according to the provisions of that amendment to the Finance Act 2014, even this transaction between an X and a Z, which is an unrelated person, will be covered for transfer pricing just because Z had earlier some agreement with Y, and Y was the associated person of X. This is an additional transaction which will attract the provisions of transfer pricing. So you can see now, tangible assets, intangible assets, the capital borrowing, lending of money, bank guarantees, including the transfers of trading securities. That was the third. And the fourth that was added, that even though the transaction is with an unrelated party, but that unrelated party had some in the past, an agreement with an associated enterprise, this transaction with an unrelated party should also be a subject matter of transfer pricing. This is what 92B talks about international transactions. Are you getting that, my dear friends? Okay. And now, comes the second part of the transaction after international is specified domestic transactions. These are being defined by section 92BA, and they say that following shall be considered to be the specified domestic transactions for the purpose of transfer pricing. Where payments are to be made or are already made to a person specified in the section 4040 A, capital A, 40 A into bracket 2. That will be the first transaction that will be called as specified domestic transactions. The number 2 would be the transactions which are covered, my dear friend, under section 808I-A, capital A, 8I-A. That will be the second one. And the third one are the transactions which are covered under section 8I-IA, subsection 8. I repeat, transactions of section 8I-IA, subsection 8. And fourthly, it includes the transactions which are covered under section 8I-IA, 8I-IA, subsection 10. Subsection 10. And finally, it also covers the transactions which are covered under the chapter 6A, the deductions. The deductions which are covered under chapter 6A but are not affected by the section 8I-IA, subsection 8 and subsection 10. They will be covered up here. It also talks about the sections connected with the section 10AA and any other notified transactions by the board will be considered to be a specified domestic transaction. But please note, the specified domestic transactions provisions will be applicable provided these transactions are exceeding rupees 2020 crores in aggregate during a previous year. किसी भी फाइनेंशियल ईयर के दौरान इन सब ट्रांजैक्शन इकट्ठे होकर 20 करोड़ रुपए के ऊपर के हैं, तब जाकर ये स्पेसिफाइड डोमेस्टिक ट्रांजैक्शंस उन्हें अप्लाई होगा. In nutshell, the 92BA gives you a list of what are specified domestic transactions. Is that okay to you? Okay. So by this time, my dear friends, we have covered two concepts. 92B. What is 92B? International transactions. And what is 92BA? Specified domestic transactions. Is that clear? In that international transactions 92B, remember, we cover those tangible, intangible, money lending, borrowing, bank guarantees, trading of securities, as well as certain transactions of unrelated party where they had in the past some agreements with the associated person. That was all 92B. We came to 92B as specified. We took first example of that person called and covered by forti A2. Then we went to the transactions of ATI IA, subsection 8, ATI IA, subsection 10, transactions of ATI IA, deductions of chapter 6A or 10AA, where ATI IA, subsection 8 and 10 are not applicable, and any other specified transactions by the board. Benchmark for specified domestic transactions was during the previous year, the aggregate value of all these transactions should exceed rupees 20 CR. But in order to attract the transfer pricing provisions, the third and an important issue to recollect, that it should have been done. This transaction should have been done between persons who are called associated persons. So therefore, that question arises, who are these associated persons? ये कौन है जिसे हम associated persons का दर्जा दे सकते हैं? ये सारी बात के लिए कुछ पैरामीटर्स बताए गए हैं सेक्शन 92A के जरिए. Section 92A provides me 12 parameters by which you can say that these two persons are said to be associated persons. Now, how to bring that? Let's take one by one. The very first thing we say that at any time during the previous year, not on the first day, not on the last day, not throughout the year, at any time, even for a day, even for 5 days, even for a month out of 12 months, at any time during the previous year. If two persons have the following, out of the following, any one of the criteria is applicable, they shall be called by the word as associated persons. सबसे पहली है कि if one enterprise holds 26% or more of the voting rights in the another enterprise. If one enterprise holds 26% or more of the voting rights in another enterprise, then these two enterprises shall be called by the word as associated persons. Are you getting this? That if one enterprise holds 26% or more than that of the voting rights in another enterprise, both will be called as associated. I slightly change. थोड़ा सा मरोड़ देता हूं. If any person, instead of enterprise, if any person holds 26% or more of the voting rights, where in each of the both enterprises, there are two enterprises, both the enterprises will be called by the word as associated enterprise or associated persons. Can you see the difference? First time say, one enterprise holds 26% or more in another, and second time I said any person holds 26% or more than that in each of these two enterprises, then both these enterprises will be called as associated persons. A third criteria, and the third criteria is if one enterprise finances more than 51% of the book value of the assets of other enterprise, finances 51% of the book value or more than that of the other enterprise. Now when I say finances means what? You give loans. So if your loan givens are 51% or more than that of the book values of the assets of the enterprise, then these two enterprises would be called associated person. You will say why? But naturally, when I finance more than 51% of that other company's or what you call assets, will I not be able to influence the price? Can I not ask them to charge me a little lesser than the market price? I can, and they will oblige me. They will oblige me. And that is the reason why transfer pricing provision should apply. What price I want? Not concessional price, not a price under undue influence, but the price at the arm's length price, which I would have charged to any stranger in the market. That is called ALP. And that is why this criteria of defining associated enterprise. And in the next criteria, where one enterprise becomes a guarantor for the borrowings of the other enterprise, and that guarantor is of 10% or more than 10% of the borrowings, then such two enterprises shall be called by the word as associated persons. Not only that, but where 50% or more than that of the board of directors, 50% or more than that of the board of directors of one enterprise are appointed by the other enterprise, or one or more executive directors are appointed by the other enterprise, then such two enterprises shall always be called by the word as associated enterprise. क्या बताया गया है कि 50% से ज्यादा बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स या एक से ज्यादा एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर की अपॉइंटमेंट अगर दूसरी कंपनी कर सकती है तो फिर ऐसी दोनों कंपनियों को हम क्या बोलेंगे? एसोसिएटेड एंटरप्राइज. I slightly change that 50% or more than that of a board of directors or a one executive director or more than one executive directors are appointed for each of the two enterprises, are appointed for each of the two enterprises by the same person. Then such two enterprises shall be called by the word as associated enterprise. कहने का मतलब जब 50% से ज्यादा बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स या एक से ज्यादा एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर दोनों कंपनियों में अगर कोई एक व्यक्ति ही अपॉइंट करती है तो फिर ऐसी दो एंटरप्राइज को हम एसोसिएटेड एंटरप्राइज का दर्जा देंगे. So in both the cases, either one enterprise appoints 50% of their board of directors or more, or one executive director or more than one executive director. Who appoints? the one enterprise for the other enterprise, then these two enterprises shall be called as associated enterprise. But alternatively, in both these enterprises, if one person appoints 50% of, or more than that of board of directors, or a one or a more executive director in both the companies are appointed by one and the same person, then certainly these two associated enterprises will be called by the word as associated enterprise. Apart from this, if the business of one enterprise depends upon the trademark, the patents, the licenses of the other enterprise, then again these two enterprises will be called by the word as associated enterprise. What is that? If the business of the one enterprise depends upon the trademark, patents and licenses of the second enterprise, then these two enterprises shall be called by the word as associated enterprise. Are you following? And where more than 90% of the raw materials, when more than 90% of the raw materials required by one enterprise are supplied by the other enterprise, then again these two enterprises shall be called by the word as associated enterprise. 90% से ज्यादा अगर रॉ मटीरियल एक कंपनी के लिए दूसरी कंपनी अगर प्रोवाइड करती है तो फिर ये दोनों कंपनियों को हम क्या बोलेंगे? एसोसिएटेड एंटरप्राइज. सो दीज आर द criterias on which we say that the two enterprises are associated enterprises. Up till now, are you following? Are you following what we say? Okay. In addition now, if you find that when the goods are sold, by one enterprise, its price is decided or controlled by the other enterprise, then these two enterprises shall be called by the word as what? Associated enterprise. जो अपने गुड्स बेच रहे हैं उनकी सेलिंग प्राइस अगर दूसरी कंपनी कंट्रोल करती है, तय करती है, ऐसे हालात में ये दोनों कंपनियों को हम एसोसिएटेड एंटरप्राइज का दर्जा देंगे. एंड फर्दर टू दैट, if any individual who controls the first enterprise, he also controls the second enterprise directly or through his relative, then again both those enterprises will be called by the word as associated persons. Or it might be another situation that an enterprise is controlled by an HUF. A HUF controls one enterprise, and another enterprise is controlled by the same HUF, or if not the same HUF, by any member of that HUF, or any relative of a member of that HUF, then these two enterprises will be called by the word as associated enterprise. It can be possible, the last thing, that if a firm AOP or a BOI, a firm AOP or a BOI has a 10% or a more than 10% of the voting rights or a share in a profit in another firm, in another AOP or in another BOI, then these both, the first and the second firm, the first and the second AOP and the first and the second BOI shall be called by the word as associated enterprise. So in a nutshell, we have gone through a dozen items, a dozen criterias that makes an enterprise to be called by the word as associated enterprise. मैंने कहा था ये 3 चीजें हैं जहां से ट्रिगर होगा ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग प्रोविजंस. एक 92B इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शन और एसोसिएटेड पर्सन. दूसरा था specified domestic transactions or associated persons. And the moment the international transaction of 92B or a specified domestic transaction of 92BA happens between the associated persons as defined under 92A, my dear friend, the provisions of transfer pricing triggers, and the trigger point starts from a terminology called ALP, that is arm length price. It's called as what? Arm length price. And to understand this arm length price, let's start knocking the doors, my dear friend, knocking the doors of the section 92BC and the rule number 10B. Okay, we will get something out of that, and what those contents are, let's see right now. And now the section 92B, the international, and 92BA, the specified domestic transactions happening between the associated persons as defined under section 92A, will trigger the transfer pricing. And the transfer pricing begins with a calculation of ALP. What is that? Arm length price. It's called as arm length price. To calculate that arm length price, the ways and means, the methodology is all given under rule 10B. So section 92C takes a help of the rule 10B and formulates that any one of the methods given there, any one which is said to be the most suitable one, can be adopted for the purpose of ALP. To start with that, the very first one is called by the word as comparative, unparalleled prices. Comparative, uncontrolled prices. It's called as what? Comparative, uncontrolled prices. In short, I'm going to call it comparative C. The uncontrolled is U and the price is P. So CUP. The method can also be known by the word as cup method, which means comparative uncontrolled prices. Now under this cup method, under cup method what we do is, we consider the price of an unrelated party, and out of that we do certain adjustments, and these adjustments are basically towards any transactions which are called CIF, the CIF values. We do the adjustments with regard to the warranties, that is also covered. So all those transactions are deducted out of the price of an unrelated party. These are called functional differences, which are already there in a related transaction. So to understand this, let's see to this presentation, where you see a price of an unrelated transaction, and from that we minus the functional differences arising of because of the CIF or the warranties, etc. You get the balance amount, which will be called as a price for the unrelated party transaction, and that can be taken for a case as good as ALP. But this is good and most suggested if it is a case of a transactions of loans or tangible goods. It works well in case of royalties. But if it is other than that, you have to go and see what the next method is. And the second method, my dear friend, is called by the word as resale price method. Resale price method. Now what do we do here? In this resale price method, we take the price at which these goods which are procured are resold. So that's the beginning point. The resale price of the goods, that will be our starting point here, and out of that we minus the industry's GP percentage. The industry's GP percentage, we minus it. We also minus any expenses which were incurred at the time of what? Purchase. Those expenses are deducted. Two things are deducted. The GP percentage is deducted of the industry, and number two are the purchase expenses are deducted. And thirdly and finally here, what we deduct are the functional differences arising out of that CIF or arising out of that warranties are also deducted. And the balance, what is left out, would be called by the word as ALP. But remember, this method is only good for the finished products which are distributed and where distribution cost is not of much value addition. At that time, this resale price method is more appropriate to find out what the ALP. So there are two methods, the cup method, the comparable uncontrolled price, and number two, the resale price method. Are you following with these two methods? Okay. The third method is called cost plus method. What is called? It's called as cost plus method. Now, in this method, what do? We first take, and we take here is a direct cost. In this third method, which is called as cost plus method, we first take is a direct cost, okay, and to the direct cost, we add is an indirect cost. So direct plus indirect, you get the total cost. And once the total cost is arrived, you have to add, and add is not the industry's GP, no. What you have to add is the adjusted industry GP percentage. Adjusted, I'm using the word, adjusted industry's GP percentage. Now you'll ask me, sir, what is that adjusted industry GP percentage? Okay, see down below. To get that adjusted industry GP, we start with industry's normal GP percentage. We take that industry's normal GP percentage, and from that we deduct are the functional differences with our related parties, maybe that CF values, maybe that warranties. We give that adjustment, and after that, whatever we get, it will be called by the word as adjusted industry's GP percentage. Are you clear about that? The adjusted industry GP percentage, take that and apply it in the earlier total cost. And once you apply that adjusted industry GP percentage to the cost, you will get is a arm length price. What do you get? The ALP. But mind you, this method is very, very suitable for raw materials or for semi-finished goods. It's good to apply this method when you are having the raw materials or the semi-finished goods. Then this cost plus method is one of the most suitable method to arrive ALP. The next method, and that's called by the word as profit split method, SPLIT, split method. यानी प्रॉफिट का बंटवारा करो, split. When this is done, when an international transaction occurs through a number of different enterprises, multiple layers of enterprises, at that time, to arrive the ALP for each one of them, the first step is to arrive the profits for each one of them. How do we get The answer you can see here. The enterprises are enterprise A, the enterprise B, and enterprise C. Together, the total profits made for all the three enterprises are in the last column. But that is total profits of A plus B plus C. What you need to do is reallocate them on two criteria. One, on the direct contribution. How much A directly contributed, how much B directly contributed, how much C directly contributed. Based on that, remove from that total the share of A, the share of B, and the share of C. All together, the total profits would reduce. And who will get that share? The A will get the share, the B will get the share, and C will get the share. In a what proportion? In the direct contribution. So now you see the last column, there is still a balance left out, and that balance left out will now be reallocated between A, B, and C. But now this is not directly. The proportion would be either based on their functional contributions, or it will be based on asset employments, or it will be based on the risk bearings. In that proportions, the second part will be again divided between them, so that the last column turns out to be nil, and the balance is then divided between A, B, and C. Now ABC has got two shares, one directly proportionate, one indirectly proportionate, and the total of that is the profits belonging to A, the profits belonging to B, and the profits belonging to C. So what we have done, the total profits are splitted between A, B, and C on certain criteria. One direct contributions, one indirect based on asset employment, might be based on the functions proportions, or might be based on the risk bearing. And that's how this method is suitable when there are multiple enterprises layer to complete one international transactions. So you see by this time, number one method was a cut method, number two was a resale price method, number three was a cost plus method, and number four is now called as profit split method. Are you following about this? Okay. And another method that is called net margin method. The transactions of net margin method. In this, what we do exactly, we consider the actual net margins of the industry. Say, for example, here we say the actual net margin of the industry, and to that we do the adjustment which are arising out of the functional differences for a transaction for the related party. Maybe all those warranties, maybe all those CIF values. And once we do those adjustments of the functional differences, the balance what we get is a net margin for an unrelated party's transaction. And that should be called that should be considered as the base for our ALP. Are you getting? From the net margin of the industry, we do the adjustments of the functional differences, and we then arrive is a net margin for that particular unrelated party transactions. And this is more oftenly used for a semi-finished products or services, and particularly wherever there are unsuitable items for the distribution basis, there also you can use this net margin methods. So we have copper method, we have a resale method, resale price method, we have a cost plus method, we have a profit split method, and we have a transaction net margin method. Out of this 5, any specified method, depending upon the nature, you can select. If not, the board may specify a specific method and you have to follow that. But this is a framework within which the ALP shall be decided. Are you getting through these methods of finding out what should be the ALP? Okay. So students, have you followed all the provisions and sections in this topic?
Yeah!
Have you also followed all the case laws and civility circulars?
Yeah!